Perhaps the sentiments contained in the following pages are not yet sufficiently fashionable to procure them general favor. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. These are the starting words of the pamphlet Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine. This document would go on to pave the future of America and would help us in many ways. Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine, was a pamphlet written to argue for American independence. It said many things about what was wrong with staying with Britain and pushed many Americans to be patriots. It fanned the flames of the war and was the first document to push for American independence. Thomas Paine, author of Common Sense, was born February 9, 1737, to a family in Thetford, part of the United Kingdom. At the time, nobody knew what he'd do for America, but as he grew, he did some extraordinary things for us.
Common Sense, which was published on January 10, 1776, was a pamphlet arguing for American independence. It was published anonymously and represented most of what the patriots in America were trying to say.
At the time, most papers and pamphlets that were published were written in such a way that only noble people who had gotten a good education could understand what they were saying, but Common Sense was written so anyone could understand it. He somewhat remade the English language, and that's part of why his pamphlet was so popular.
In the time that Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, America was going through a war for independence. The war began on April 19, 1775, and ended on September 3, 1783. Between those years, Common Sense was published.
When Common Sense was published, it changed many things about the Revolution. At the time, there were many people who were still on the fence about what side of the war they were on. Common Sense caused the people who did not know what side they were on to actually choose one.
With more people fighting in the Revolution, we were able to take down Britain and become independent. Common Sense's basic idea was to convince the colonists that staying with Britain was not an option and the colonies had to become independent. This strengthened our fight in the war and fanned the flames of the Revolution.
Common Sense, one of the first documents to ask for American independence, stated that staying with Britain was against common sense, and that we had to become independent to be truly free. It also mentioned that, as our interview told us, that Britain had no constitution, and that aristocracy is illegal without consent of the governed. Thomas Paine believed that society and government were very different and had very different purposes. Common Sense stated, according to the SparkNotes analysis, society, according to Paine, is everything constructive and good that people join together to accomplish. Government, on the other hand, is an institution whose sole purpose is to protect us from our own vices. Government has its origins in the evil of man and is therefore a necessary evil at best. Paine says that the government's sole purpose is to protect life, liberty, and property, and that a government should be judged solely on the basis of the extent to which it accomplishes this goal. We did an interview with Gary Burton from the Thomas Paine National History Association. He answered the questions we had, and in great detail.
What were some of the economic changes that Common Sense caused?
Common Sense was the pivotal moment when the scale was tilted to independence, and that caused a rapid scramble to alter the economy to be independent of Britain and produce the goods it would need to fight the war. Some of that had begun before Common Sense. Paine was a leader in promoting the production of saltpeter, an ingredient essential for making gunpowder, writing articles on how to produce it in homes. Common Sense also pointed out the domestic industries that were needed to win a war, and they were spurred on by Common Sense.
How did Common Sense get as popular with the colonists as quickly as it did?
Paine invented a new style of writing and actually changed the English language. Paine had little formal education. He was self-taught, and his style spoke directly to the mass of people, not the elite. He did not use erudite references to Greek or Roman history, or quote Latin phrases like most of the writing then. He wrote with a plain-spoken, common-sense style, but the content was very profound. His witticisms, humor, and irrefutable logic made the combination of style and content unique in world literature. He also wrote it to be read aloud, and his prose has a melodic character to it, so both content and style made it a bestseller, and mostly, his politics for revolution hit the right nerve.
What are some arguments against being with Britain that Thomas Paine had?
You must read Common Sense for yourself, but there are many. He starts by explaining the history and nature of government, and then shows how monarchy is an absurdity. Paine knew that the people opposed the ministry in Britain, but still kept attachments to the king. Common Sense blew that away. He also showed how Britain had no constitution, and that without consent of the governed, aristocracy is illegal and an affront to the dignity of man. He showed how Britain's colonialism was sapping and oppressing America, and that Americans owed nothing to Britain and could offer an asylum to mankind if Britain could be defeated. Then he explained how to defeat them and on what principles to build a new government. Common Sense is the real founding document of the United States of America. There were many changes that were caused by Common Sense. Socially, most of the people who weren't sure of their position in the war were now aware of what side they were on. Due to this, we were able to gain more soldiers and become independent. Politically, it caused the colonies to be backed up more in the Revolutionary War, allowing us to become independent. Because we were now independent, we needed to have someone who was in charge, but they couldn't be a king, because that was exactly what we were trying to get rid of in the war. We needed someone who would take charge, but also make sure they didn't rule without any mercy. We decided on democracy, where we would have a president who was voted in by the people of the country.
Economically, there was a massive change in the colonies. According to the Thomas Paine National History Association, common sense was the pivotal moment when the scale was tilted to independence, and that caused a rapid scramble to alter the economy to be independent of Britain. Basically, the change to independence caused the economy to change because the Americans had to make everything that they once got from Britain. This caused the economy to change and the value of currency and trading to change along with it.
Overall, Thomas Paine's common sense changed many things about our country. It helped fuel the fire of independence and allowed us to gain more soldiers to help fight. Common sense is one major reason we have independence.
There are many things we should thank Thomas Paine for, but that's a different story for a different day.